they call that people? They call that people savage. But even in those names, if you think about it, primitive, the root word is prime, which literally means first. So even in the names, when they was attempting to insult people of color, they was actually telling you who the people of color was. They was the prime, they was the original. That's what they were telling you. When you heard native, that means the original people of a land. So they were using terms that was meant to be insulting, but those terms was actually defining what those people were and who those people were. So anyway, back to the point.
If I asked you to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and to make a numerical list of all the things that you would be willing to die for, how long is your list?
Panther 48.
Willing to die for.
Panther 48.
Willing to die for. How long is your list?
What is the tribal self?
Panther
The
48.
tribal self is what goes above the immediate acquaintances of the social
Willing
group.
to die
The
for.
family, the people you know, live next door.
You would be willing
I'm
to
talking
die
about
for.
tribal self.
Panther 48.
I'm talking about those living, those yet unborn.
One thing that you probably didn't heard Brother E say a lot, if you've ever watched our channel, is that if you do not understand what white supremacy is, then everything else that you think you understand will only confuse you. So with today's show, we're going to try to give an understanding of what white supremacy is. We did a forerunner introduction, so to speak, where we had members of the current New Black Panther Party on the show with us to build on the principles of white supremacy. And if you haven't checked out that show, check it out. But today we're going to go into the detail. We're going to get down to the roots of what this thing is. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Brother E and let him lay the foundation for today's dialogue and discussion. Peace, Brother E. The mic is on you. Go.
To just put to put the imperial hat back on to say we're going to govern those countries.
So, did you like my video?
The cogs in the wheel.
No, you way off. So tonight, we want to more directly address what are some of the principles involved in racism, white supremacy. First of all, what is a principle? A principle is a fundamental truth or proposition that there's a foundation for a system or a culture or a behavior. It's not media, it's not, chemical weapons, it's not any of those things. Those are not principles. Principles are things upon which people build their lifestyle, their attitude, the way they go about things. And for me at this point in life, it is easiest to say that racism, white supremacy is ultimately the imposition of European values and principles on non-white people. Now, we talked about it, and I understand folks like to have things enumerated. Principle 1, principle 2, principle 3. So I'm gonna try. But you all know how fluid all of this is for me. So don't be surprised if I start out with number one, and we will, and touch on about 4 or 5 other ones that we end up coming back to and talking over, because they're all interrelated. But it's important we start to develop an understanding of, again, what principles are, what they look like, and in this case, whose principles they are. So I've got a list of a few. It's not exhaustive. It's a couple, maybe more, depending on how time flows, depending on how the discussion goes. And no, I'm not going to dominate this. It's going to be a dialogue. It's going to be a conversation. So y'all get over all of that. Y'all trying to put me on the spot, host the show.
We read it. We just want you to lay the foundation.
No good and well, I don't like doing this. I'm not a Zoom kind of guy. I get no feedback right now, and it just bothers the hell out of me. But in order to talk about the first one, maybe the second, fourth, and eighth one, let me show you all this real quick. Hang on just a sec.
Then it's time for us to just put
All right, here we go.
Then it's time for us to just put the imperial hat back on to say, we're going to govern those countries if you're incapable of governing yourselves, because enough is enough. We're done being invaded.
Because our own national security risk is at stake.
Exactly.
National security interests are at stake.
You can say that about pretty much all of Africa. They're incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens, because the governments there are all about looting and pillaging and lining their pockets and going shopping in Paris, instead of actually
hold on a second. Hold on. People on the left are going to watch this. They're going to say, wait a minute, Eric Prince is talking about being a colonialist again.
Absolutely. Yes.
One of the most vexing questions in African American history.
So, War, you know who Eric Prince is?
Yeah, that's that founder of Blackwater.
Yep. And what is Blackwater? Since you are a military person.
Mercenary group.
So Blackwater is a group of, for the most part, former soldiers in somebody's regular army who've gotten out of the army and now are paid a lot of money to go around the world and kill people. Not for a cause, not for freedom, not for democracy, but for a paycheck. They will go into your town, slaughter everybody, and go home and not think about it. What this feeds into is, or what this highlights for is a few things. One being that white folks are warmongers, that war is a principle that they have structured their society around. Whether it's their holidays, whether it's government spending, whether it is whatever it is, there's always there are statues, there are stadiums named after warmongers. These are things that these people praise and honor. Their biggest cultures, their cultures that they like to throw up and say, this is our civilization. This is an example of our greatness. One comes to mind is Rome. They were hellish when it came to war. They loved war. They pursued war. The Vikings, you don't even have to go into that. If you know anything about the Vikings, the only thing they understood was war. So war and warmongering is a part of it, but so too is paternalism. White people have this really sincere mentality that they believe that they are the ones who have to lead everyone into a greater self, that they are the parent, the rest of us are children. Especially this is true when you talk to liberal white folks. When they talk about the government helping, when they talk about you can't do this to these people, I always in the back of my head hear them with this very condescending attitude that no one else can do what it is they've done, as if what they've done is so magnificent. So again, as I say, it kind of bleeds into multiple principles. But suffice it to say, paternalism is a key characteristic of racism, white supremacy, how it acts and how it moves. Another one is materialism. Everybody, Psych has mentioned before in the past, everybody's material. Everybody needs something material to survive, to live. But if your lifestyle is based on material things. That's different. It becomes a principle. You are not able to process, you are not able to understand anything beyond what your fingers, your toes, your five senses are able to tell you. And that is absolutely a principle that you find within white culture. Whether it's going to church, whether it's, I don't know, anything else, it's always the surface. They talk about it on the surface level. If you dig any further, take religion, for example. If you go any further than going to church, singing some hymns and going home, if you dig any deeper into all of that, you start to get into the areas that they don't want to touch. They have a lot of derogatory terms for when people build and dig into what it is scripture is saying and actually apply, because for them, simply talking about it is enough for it to be a reality. Whether you live by it or not is irrelevant, which is one of the reasons they're able to be warmongers, because on Sunday they have no problem talking about a man who was supposedly a pacifist, was supposedly all about peace and turning the other cheek. Become Monday morning, they're out murdering folks because those were just words the day before, and it really has no substance beyond saying those words. And they'll even use that scripture that they taught to you in order to justify what it is they're doing. And it does work as long as you stay on the surface level of it. Speaking of religion, one of my favorites, insofar as the principles of the European or of racism, white supremacy, is the repression of the feminine, right? It would be easy to talk about how the female in day-to-day society, in European society, just easily look back at their history, how their women have occupied the lowest rung in their societies, not including folks that were in slave status. But even then, the female has always occupied the lowest rung. That's a huge reason for what it is they call now feminism. This idea that women are equal, or women have to do jobs that men do, or whatever the bullshit is grown into now. Is this idea that women are equal to men, that pursuing being able to do the same things that males do is somehow an integral part of their expression or their freedom. When in reality, and we've said this for quite some time, and it's starting to, especially with sisters starting to see that what they've been sold is bullshit. But the idea or the fact, or at least in my line, that what women were fighting for or have been feeling is not the right to go out and do the same jobs. It's not the right to have a high body count and for it to be okay. It's none of those things. It's actually much deeper than that, but Europeans can only deal with the surface. Remember, that's a principle of racism, white supremacy. It's staying on the surface. Because if you dig deeper, you start to realize that what the feminine has been denied in this society, what females have been denied in this society, is the respect for what it is they bring to the table. They've been denied the respect for their femininity, for their household. I mean, I was thinking about it a while ago. So in the early part of the 19th, around World War II, around that time, industry jobs, everything was becoming more and more industrialized, and these jobs and these factories were done by males, right? Along comes World War II, and a vast majority of the males went off to fight this war. But these industries needed to still keep going. Up until this point in time, women, for the most part, were in the home. But at this point, you enter, what is the name? Rosie, what is that chick? Y'all seen that white girl doing like that? That little logo, I forget her name. But it was a full-on campaign. I believe Bernays was involved in it. But to get women inspired to go into the workforce in order to replace them, in order to replace the males. So now it became a household without the female there, without the woman there, without the mother there, because she left the home. So what did the schools have to do? Lo and behold, they turned around and they started teaching home ec. high school, college. And then on some level, we paid them to do that. They took out, you know, they one of the things they like to throw up is in our cultures and ancient cultures and other cultures, women are not allowed to go to university. Women are not allowed to go to college, because in their minds, the only place that you learn is at school. When in reality, you're learning your entire life. We understood that. So while boys would go out with their fathers to learn what it is to be a man, sisters would stay with their mothers and learn what it is to be a woman. They were learning. But now these white folks put a stove and a washing machine and a washer and dryer and all of this stuff that you find in the kitchen and in the home, they put it in the schools so that little girls can go there, little boys can go there to learn what was already being taught in the home, until they took the teacher out of the home and put her to work. And so in doing so, they put women on the front line, took them away from their femininity, and they started becoming more masculine. They started becoming more male, because repression of the feminine is an absolute must. And we can extend it beyond that, even to religion. Easy enough for us. We know, we've been aware of, we understood. The Holy Ghost is a woman, believe it or not, or a replacement for, or a slot holder for. But that part of our concept of the Creator had to be minimized and pushed to the side, because it's a male-oriented lifestyle. It's a male-oriented culture. And so repression of the feminine is not just about the physical, which it absolutely is, but it's also very much more about the spiritual. Remember, the masculine is about projecting into this world. The feminine is about going into oneself, self-reflection, understanding. And with that divine repressed, we were discouraged, barred, shamed, whatever you want to call it, from going into ourselves and projecting only into the material, projecting only into what the European was in control of, projecting only into a world that they were the masters of. And so it was a necessary move to repress and to control the feminine. Also, because our cultures tended to be matrilineal. Yes, there was a man on the throne who sat and discussed things with other heads of state, because when you are discussing things in a physical situation, you want your strongest, most dominant, most threatening figure in the room, and that's always going to be a male. But when that brother went home, he understood that there was a discussion to be had. There was another part of the reasoning and the understanding that had to go on with that divine feminine. In fact, one of Aset's names is the throne of Heru, meaning that though a man may occupy the throne, it's the woman who decides who's going to sit on that throne, because the leadership passed through her. And so the repression of the feminine was absolute, not just because they needed to repress it in them, but even more so because they needed to repress it in us, because they understood that we lean on that. We lean on the duality, which is another principle of European culture, is that there is no duality. We're dualistic people. They are singular. They are linear in their thought. They're not able to process and understand the things, even though their science is coming back around to discover what we had said so many years ago. Okay, so I have one more clip right quick, because I'm up to my favorite one. It's my last one. Here you go. This one's real short, so you gotta pay attention. You're gonna miss it.
If you had to work more than one job to have a roof over your head or food on the table, you probably shouldn't have taken the job that's not paying you enough. That'd be a you problem. Okay, so that, if y'all saw and heard it all right?
Yes.
So that was this white dude who's basically, I want to call him a journalist, but he's not a journalist. He's a talking head for the establishment. and they love him because he goes in and he chops people up. He's at odds loggerheads right now with Candace Owens. They're fighting over the whole Zion issue and the Palestinians over there about what she said and what he thinks and blah, blah, blah. But the attitude that he expressed is one of, it sums up, encapsulates to me the European attitude toward one another. And it's, for me, the principle that defines and gives birth to everything else. And that's the individualism. If you have to work 2 jobs, and this is a lot of people, in order to maintain the house you're in, then you probably shouldn't have took the job that you were given. That's a you problem. Individuals cannot conceive of a reality in which the group carries weight, which is totally counterculture for us. But in their culture, it's a principle. Things like the whole attitude of this country of private ownership, personal responsibility, all of these things feed into or come from this idea of being an individual. And the more we pursue the individual, the more we're able to, or the more we're not able to do those things that are absolutely necessary for us. Individualism is this idea that we are not, and we had a debate, I remember with Craig, it was more of an argument, I think, back in the day, trying to get him to understand an individual, unless you're dealing with the indivisible duality. The individual is something that is not similar to anything else. It is cut off, it is unique in and of itself. And I was the attitude that similar completely destroys the concept. African people in this country have learned to excel in a system that tells them that everything about them is wrong. And then because we've had a Black president, because we've had, Black folks heads of CEOs of various companies, the European is able to sit back and say, Black folks are doing great. It's kind of like if war, and for pretend's sake, let's say war's got a brother that's got 15 baby mamas. He's got a sister that's strung out. He's got a mama that's out there selling the stuff for money. But war comes along, and because war has a $100,000 job, wife, 2 kids, nice little home in San Diego chilling, somebody looks at war and says, oh, war's family is doing great. Because that one individual has made some moves, because that one individual has excelled in a certain situation. It would be nonsense to say his family is doing great just because he's doing great. All of the other issues the family's got going on have nothing to do with him having the job that he has. And it's the same for us. Just because, Jay-Z's got big money or Oprah's a billionaire or whatever the situation is, doesn't mean the family is doing well. But because we're individuals, we're able to stand back and say, hey, the system that chews our people up and spits it out has just elected a new CEO, and he's doing great, so we must be doing better. When Europeans sit up, one of the first things they like to do, they love saying this shit. They love saying, when you start talking about slavery, well, I never owned any slaves. Well, duh, I was never formally enslaved. But because their mindset is that of an individual, they're able to detach themselves, except when they want to. For President's Day or Veterans Day or whatever, they can step in, take the glory, and then step back because they're individuals, and so they're not accountable individually for George Washington raping Black children. They aren't able on a very fundamental level to understand the concept of group. And because we've accepted their culture because we've excelled at their culture, neither can we. When we talk about sisters, one of the first things sisters want to do, well, I'm not like that. We say whatever, sisters do X, Y, Z. First thing is sister come back, well, that ain't all of us. I'm not like that. Not able to understand that we're talking in terms of groups. We always want to personalize whatever it is we're talking about, as opposed to dealing with the situation. You can't talk about Black people without talking in generalities. You can't talk about women or men without generalities. The word men is a generality. You know, Black folk is a generality. But the reality of it is, whatever you can say about African folk in this country, you can say about each individual one of us to one degree or another. And that's just the way it is. But we resist that because we've been convinced that we're individuals and that we have no stake, no claim, no attachment to anybody else in this group that we've been given. In fact, this is the exact attitude of capitalism. And we all know capitalism is just the economics of racism, white supremacy. So of course somebody like, oh, I don't know, P. Diddy could come up and make big money being a sex trafficker because he has no individual stock in their lives and the lives of those around them. He is all about himself, like anybody else that excels in it. And that's just what it is. Capitalism is the deification and the monetization. Matter of fact, capitalism is the monetized deification of the individual. So it's the individual being monetized. You know, you, what do you call it? You exploit yourself, you put yourself out there in exchange for money. Best example, OnlyFans. Is that right? OnlyFans is fan only. You know, I don't keep up with all this shit.
OnlyFans, that's it.
OnlyFans. It's actually okay. It's actually, I've seen videos of chicks not understanding why putting yourself out there on video like that is not okay. Not able to comprehend that exploiting, let alone yourself, for making money is not an okay thing. But this is the way economics in this country works. Economics in this country is based on what you can exploit for how much money. And it owes nothing, has nothing to any group.
Let me say this about that. Let me just kind of start at where you ended at with the whole concept of exploiting. I would say part of people's twisted mentality on that is that what makes the concept of exploitation bad is if it's done to another person. So viewing themselves as the exploiter and the exploitee, in their mind, is not a bad thing because they're not looking at it through the lens of imperialism. They're looking at it through the lens of, hey, I'm making money off my own self. And if you look at the profession, because all that is just prostitution. If you look at the concept of prostitution from the stance of it being one of the world's, or what they call the world's oldest profession, then now you get into the manipulation between the male and the female, and one using something about themselves in order to create a drive for the opposite sex. I would think that would even tie right back into when you talk about Rosie the Riveter, Rosie the Riveter, which was basically a symbol, what they call girl power symbol that came out of World War II to basically get the woman into the factory. By getting the woman into the factory, this goes right back into kind of what you was talking about, because the whole point then was to create a household that would take two incomes in order for that household to be able to be stable. So the whole aspect of that, the masculine and feminine point came into play, because now it took two working parents in order to have enough economics for the house to survive and for the house to maintain. But that goes, to me, back into a further aspect of exploitation, which kind of ties right back into why an ex-Navy SEAL would be able to try to say that Africans don't know how to manage their own government. Mind you, this is an ex-Navy SEAL that worked hand in hand with the CIA, and the job of the CIA is the top of governance. How do they topple governments? By going in and create corruption and helping to exploit the people of the land and the resources of that land, and to create a separation between the government and the people so that they can actually take the resources, bring in your foreign companies, to create those foreign interests, and build up that network to take back to imperialist nations. All the while creating and making sure that country, that African nation, is nowhere in a position to be able to self-sustain itself, especially in terms of its people, so that it can maintain and grow its own wealth and become a powerful nation into itself. So now when you say that and you talk about exploitation, the problem we find with this, as this ties into white supremacy, is that people are not having a problem with the concept of exploitation. If they have somewhat of a consciousness, so to speak, a conscious of it, they have a problem with who's getting exploited and how they're being exploited. So in other words, it's okay to have an to deal with the concept of exploitation. It just depends on to what degree. So then we start trying to justify exploitation, and we start living through that. Go ahead, you had something to jump on that with?
Well, I just know that we've come to a point in time when exploitation has become so second nature. People don't really even realize that what they're doing is exploitive. You know, it's easy to look back in some book and say, because this is put in the under the subtitle of slavery, say, okay, they're being exploited. But the system has become so nefarious and so slick that people have been trained every day to be exploited, to accept exploitation. They did a survey not too long ago of, I want to say, what was the last one? Gen Z asked them what they felt about a surveillance state, of constantly being watched, of constantly having everything monitored. And their attitude was, whatever, I don't care. So we've gotten to a point where even when we start to see what exploitation is, we fight it back because we know it's the norm. We know it's what's expected. Your job exploits you. You can be an entrepreneur all day long, but as soon as you hire one employee, you're exploiting that person, because you're not going to give that person the same money and benefits that you give yourself. They may work 30 times as hard while you sit back and collect the checks, but I guarantee you're going to collect more checks than what they collect, because the system is based on exploitation. That's what it is. Capitalism grew out of colonialism. It's a natural progression. And we can say that it's not, what we have today is not technically capitalism and all of that. Nothing that's tangible is pure. Nothing that's tangible is the same as the theory. Nothing has come from theory to application in a perfect form. It always is muddied up. It always falls from grace, so to speak. And over time, it's going to grow and to develop. So what we have right now today is what capitalism is. Whether it's crony capitalism or whatever you want to call it, it is what capitalism is. It's what capitalism looks like. And that system is based on, like I said, enriching the person, not the self. We enrich the self. They enrich the person. They enrich the individual. And we've become so accepting of this. It's been said many times of things like social media, that if they're giving you something for free, you're not the consumer, you're the product. They buy and sell our information so that they can manipulate us and move us like cows and get us to accept things and whatnot. And they're making huge money off of it. And we are so blind and willfully blind. People actually think that YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all these little socials, they think that these things are analogous to me and Syke bumping into each other on the street corner and having a conversation. That no government agency can come over and watch me and Syke, like back in slave time. Or now, you can't have more than two of us or whatever it was in a gathering spot at one place at one time without somebody white there to oversee it. And we actually think that these social media companies are the same as that. We don't realize that if you walked into Walmart right now, stood up on top of some of the register shit and started just cussing and throwing shit and just acting a damn fool, they have every legal right to ask you to leave. Check it. Facebook and Instagram, they're Walmart. They're businesses. They have every right to tell you stop talking that black shit and get off of here. This is not the public domain. That's why they can collect your shit and sell it and make big money off of it while you think you're having fun. Because it's a business. And they're playing a game with you because you think that you're going in and you have some freedom of speech. You ain't got no freedom of speech. You're in Walmart. You're in Instagram. That's their shit. They have every right to tell you, you can't say that in here. You don't want nobody coming into your business or your home and saying whatever. They have the exact same right. And you have no legal stance, no individual responsibility stance to fight back against it. You're only able to do it as long as they let you do it. But we're used to the exploitation, so we don't even think about that. We think that those are the same things, and they're not. We've got the digital universe completely fucked up and confused with the real shit, with the analog world. And so this system of exploitation has been slid in from day one. As soon as we're babies, everything gets exploited. From the time that you're born, you begin getting exploited every single day. Infamil is bullshit, but you're exploited because your mother's not eating right, isn't fed well, so she can't produce what she needs to produce to keep you alive. So she goes to the feds to get the cards or the WIC or whatever it is, so she can get some milk and some formula and some whatever else to feed you when you already had it. But because we're used to the exploitation, we go and get that free shit, and we go and buy some shit, and our babies start out day one fucked up. Fucked up. And that's a principle, a characteristic, whatever you want to call it, of racism, white supremacy. The reason I showed that video at the beginning with the rooster walking around is because if you notice at the beginning, those are individual steel statues. They're little statues like that big on a turntable. Each one is in a little bit different pose, but they're not moving. But when you spin that wheel that it's on and flash the right light at just the right frequency, you know, got you hypnotized, keep you watching your movies and listening to your music and shit, it looks to you like that chicken was walking. It's the illusion. And that's the shit that they do with us. We don't understand racism, white supremacy as a culture. I heard Denzel say that years ago, and I fought with that like that. Nah, bro, it's race, it's race. No, it is culture. White folks' culture demands, just like Christianity, you got to go out and proselytize and convert everybody. White folks' culture demands that they go out and create empires to dominate the world. Empire means what? It's something that you take from somebody else. So they create these empires because it's necessary for them, the way that they were brought up in the caves of Europe, for them to exercise control on the rest of the world. They're the ultimate alpha in that situation. If they're not in control, they got a problem with it. They can't compute. They can't understand it. They can't handle having more brown people in this country than they do white people. They won't say it out loud because it ain't PC, but they can't handle it. So this is the illusion that they fuck with us. We think racism, white supremacy has something to do with somebody calling you a nigger or the brother Floyd being murdered by the cops. It's got nothing to do with any of that. Those are results of the culture. The culture is what it is. You breed. They like to say, I saw a back and forth, part of a debate, I guess, between, what's his name, Eric Dyson and Jordan Peterson. And at some point, Dyson, his brother, called Peterson and said, "You're an angry white man." Peterson came back a couple of minutes later and said something to the effect, now they love to do this now. This is like the new comeback for intellectual white folks. It wasn't about race until you interjected race into the conversation. There was a white dude at the job, at the plantation that I'm at. I don't know what they were talking about, but I walked in about halfway through the conversation, I guess. This white dude said, they were laughing about something, and he said, "Yeah, man, I don't even think about race until somebody brings it up." If someone questions what white privilege is, that's white privilege. They are able to talk about it or not talk about it, think about it or not think about it. Every day that you and I wake up and there are no pyramids in our backyard, we're reminded of that shit. Every time we go to walk to the grocery store and we don't have to cross this fucking Serengeti or float down the Nile to get to the crops, we're reminded of that shit. Every day that we don't know anything about our own history and what it is we're able to do, we're reminded of what happened and how we got here. We fight to keep that shit pushed back, and it has a lot to do with the mental fucked upness that we experience and the issues that we have because we don't address it, because it's pressed back. When we know it's a conversation that has to happen. But they can decide not to have that conversation, and the only thing we get to do is decide to shut up or not shut up. That's white privilege. That's racism, white supremacy. That's another principle. White folks have a right to be comfortable. They don't want to talk about it because it makes them feel uncomfortable. Yes, it makes them very uncomfortable because they know they're guilty as fuck and they're scared as hell. But we should be having that conversation constantly because it's something that we have to deal with constantly.
Well, I got a question, E, that I think is good for the listening audience. I've noticed this since you've been talking about this subject, you keep saying white supremacy, racism, white supremacy, as if they're the same thing. Can you explain why you keep saying that, and can you give us a definition of white supremacy?
Well, white supremacy is racism is a system built on racial subjugation. Short answer. Like ism, socialism, capitalism. Capitalism is based on capital. You know, whatever ism is a doctrine or a belief, an ideology. It's an ideology based on race. White supremacy is the only form of racism in the known universe. There is no other ideology, there is no other system, there is no other culture that seeks to force itself on others. There is no other culture that submits other people through force or whatever other means to taking on their culture. So racism, white supremacy are the same thing simply because there is no other system of racial subjugation. There is no black racism because there is no system that seeks to uplift black folk and push down everybody else. It doesn't exist. Only white supremacy. So this idea that the people who define and understand that race has no biological, no medical, no scientific foundation, it's a construct. It's something they came up with. White folks that needed to protect themselves because years and years ago, and people will say it started in different directions. The one that makes the most sense to me is that white used to refer to white women of the upper, monarch and all of that. And they were called white because they didn't go out into the sun and have to work. They stayed inside all day. So their skin was very, very pale. If you were a dude and you were called white, that was somewhat of an insult because it means you didn't go out and you didn't earn a living. But as time went on, the definition and who that word white engulfed or included began to include nobles and other folks on down the hierarchy because white folks in the building, in the house, needed to protect themselves, needed to grow their ranks, needed to expand. It's a part of their mindset. So over a period of time, white came to mean something more than just an incidental characteristic. When we came to this country, white folks named us according to an incidental characteristic and reduced our reality to black. Just black. That's what you are. Nothing else to you but being black. But I digress. So at some point, white folks decided and came up with this idea of there were, I think at first there were three races: Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid. And I know y'all have heard of those before. And if you ever noticed, Mongoloid and Caucasoid, Mongoloid came primarily from from Mongolia. The Caucasoid came primarily from the Caucasus Mountain. The Negro was the only one not associated to a landmass, even then. And so over a period of time, they've added this and added that, but another aspect that was, or another part of its growth was the justification. Racial sciences, they would go and measure the skull and how big the cavity inside the skull and how big the brain was, and tried to justify that Europeans were of this upper class while everybody else, especially the Negro, was more akin to gorillas, and actually said we were the missing link between gorillas and white folks or brown folks or whoever else. So over the period of time, a caste system was built around the idea that Africans are the lowest and Europeans are on the top. And this grew into what we understand today to be racism, white supremacy. And as I said, capitalism grew out of colonialism, because colonialism was just the forerunner, laying the groundwork and allowing for those who were making the big money, those in the background, to further develop it. So I don't know if that answers the question, but somewhat.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that definition out there for the listening audience, because a lot of time, this information is something that we've been studying for the last over 2 decades, and we'll assume that, okay, this is just basic understood knowledge. But one thing that we have to learn is that a lot of time our people don't understand what these words mean. A lot of times people don't understand that racism and white supremacy are the same things. I'm gonna add on to what Brother E just talked about in the book. It's one of the books. In the book, Survival Strategies for Africans in America by Tony Browder. This is in first chapter, actually. He builds and he describes racism and white supremacy in the first chapter. I don't know if y'all can see that.
No, we can't see that. You know better than that.
Okay, I'll post it. But and it basically, he just said what he just said, but I'm gonna read this from Tony Browder. This is the author of the book. Great book to get. Tony Browder, Survival Strategy for Africans in America. This is part 2 to a book that we always mention, the Browder File, from the Browder File by Anthony Browder. It's a very basic, small, simple book, but there's a lot of information in it.
It's bathroom reading.
Yeah, you could actually get these 2 books and probably have what you need to have an intellectual discussion on race and culture with just about anybody. But just to read this right quick, and then I'm gonna build on it. He said, contrary to popular belief, there is no such thing as race. Race is a false construct Race is a false construct which was created by Europeans hundreds of years ago in order to differentiate themselves from people of African descent and other people of color throughout the world. The concept of race was created by scientists and scholars at Göttingen University in Germany between 1775 and 1800. During this 25-year period, these quote-unquote scholars invented the word Caucasian, divided humanity into races, and contended that the white race was superior. And as he just said, the word ism literally means basically an ideology, a system of belief. That's what ism is. Like he just showed you Buddhism, socialism, Confucianism, communism. Ism is a system of beliefs. For racism is a system of beliefs based on race, which is a false construct, but they took the word, and we all know what race means. If you watch people running a race or even driving, what is them things, NASCARs, every person on the track is attempting to be first. And Europeans, and the way Europeans think and the way that they saw reality, if you understand the history of what it is that they went through and what developed and mutated human beings. I like to say mutate and not evolve, because evolve makes you think that something went from a lower to a higher form, where a mutation is a genetic transformation in order to adapt it into an environment. It doesn't necessarily mean that it got better. It doesn't necessarily mean it got worse. It just means that it genetically adapted to survive. So if we understand what took place and what made Europeans mutate, then you understand that Europeans have a mind state that says that I need to be first. I need to be supreme. I need to be the superior. I need to, and they tend to think that all people are racing for this top spot. And anytime that they ran into people that wasn't racing for that top spot, then they call that people primitive. That's what they call that people. They call that people savage. But even in those names, if you think about it, primitive, the root word is prime, which literally means first. So even in the names, when they was attempting to insult people of color, they was actually telling you who the people of color was. They was the prime, they was the original. That's what they were telling you. When you heard native, that means the original people of a land. So they was using terms that was meant to be insulting, but those terms was actually defining what those people were and who those people were. So anyway, back to the point. So in this system of racism that they created, like Brother E said, they started with 3, then they evolved it to 5, and then they placed the color concept on it. You got to keep in mind that people was originally called by the land that they came from. And I just heard a rapper, Kevin Gates. I know E don't really listen to rap that much nowadays. I don't know if you ever heard of the brother, but the rapper Kevin Gates, he was on YouTube, and
Kevin Gates.
Kevin Gates, that's his name.
That's a weird name. Why his name ain't Meek Junior Little something? Kevin Gates. That's a boring name.
Yeah, it actually is. But the brother said in the video, the brother said that black is the most insulting thing that you can call him. He doesn't identify with black. And when you first heard that, you're like, whoa, what is he fit to say? What is this brother about to say? And then they ask him, what is he? What does he identify as? And he said, there's no such thing as a black land. He say, Asians come from Asia. Mexicans come from Mexico. Africans come from Africa. So he was essentially saying that he identified with being African, because we didn't always call ourselves by color. But anyway, they broke it down into 5 colors. They said that there was only 5 races, and the races was white, red, black, brown, and yellow. That's what they said. And that's how they tried to differentiate and divide the different races of people that existed on the planet. So they created this system of racism. And as E just explained, that racism and white supremacy are the exact same things. In this book, the sister talks about it in the ISIS papers, The Keys to the Colors, by Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She explains it, and she's building off what Neely Fuller talked about in the, I can never say the long name of that book, The Color Compensatory Code. E, you know it, you don't never want to help me. No, I can't never get that name right.
United Independent Contemporary Code Concept.
Yeah, it's a long name. But anyway, to get back to the point, she just basically said exactly what he said, that you got to understand that the only racism that exists on the planet is white supremacy, because they're the only people who have actually enacted a system that seeks to put white people at the top while simultaneously pushing all other people down. And as I explained before, I'm not going to go through the entire breakdown and history of this right now, but you have to understand what conditions the European arose out of. You have to understand it. And those conditions created something in the European psyche that made him believe that the resources on the planet were scarce. Food was scarce, water was scarce, everything was scarce in his thinking. So when he came out of the caves and hills of Europe, once the ice glaciers melted and he came out of that ice age, and I think I heard Dr. Umar said that you have to understand that the environment that a group of people came out of tells you their temperament. He said Europeans have an ice temperament. He said Africans have a sun temperament, and that Arabs have a sand temperament. If you understand the lands that these people come from, Europeans came completely from ice. So they came out of this environment with an ice cold-blooded temperament. And because resources were so scarce there, they viewed the entire planet as being a place of scarce resources, where they had to race against all other groups of people on the planet for resources. So automatically, if this is true, just think about it. If there's 3 of us, but there's only 2 chicken legs, and the one who doesn't get a chicken leg is the one gonna die of hunger, we will race to those chicken legs and try to accumulate the chicken legs. And maybe somebody watching this right now will be thinking, yeah, I want to be one of the person to get one of those chicken legs. But a forward thinker is probably thinking to himself, I want to be the person to get both chicken legs. I can live a whole lot longer if I had both of the chicken legs and I left the other 2 brothers with nothing. And this was the mind state that came out of those caves. And that's what the system of white supremacy is based on. Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, and I'm going to pass it to Brother E because I see his hand up. But Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad and a lot of brothers that are doing Panther uniforms now have a extraordinary love affair with Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad. So this should make all the sense in the world. Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad said that that racism and bigotry is two different things. You tend to think that they're the same, but they're not. They're two different things. Racism, bigotry is, I don't like you because of the color of your skin. Racism is that I'm going to oppress you socially, economically, politically, educationally, and any other in all 9 areas of human activity that I can possibly oppress you in order to dominate you, and I'm gonna utilize the color of your skin as the focal point to do this from. You know, and no other race of people, no other group of people on the planet Earth has the power to do so. The only group of people on the planet, on the entire planet, 196,940,000 square miles on the face of the planet Earth that has the ability to do that are European people. So therefore, European people are the only people that could be racist. They could be white supremacists. So when someone calls a black person a racist, it shows that they don't have a working definition of the word. But go ahead, Brother E.
So, and that's why things like Black history are a nice start, but it becomes a concession when we want to understand what it is we're really dealing with. Black history begins with the supposition that white folk created us, with the idea that Black folks didn't exist until white folks called us Black. And that when we look at Black history, more often than not, almost completely, can't say completely because there are those that stray, but almost completely, we focus on individual accomplishments in this country. We focus on Garrett Morgan, great brother, did some nice stuff. We focus on, W.D. Du Bois. We focus on individuals who made a contribution that is safe for white folks to accept or to be bothered with. But studying Black history, again, Black history didn't begin until we came here. Studying our history beyond the shores of this country gives us an idea, an understanding, and that's probably a show topic we're doing, the differences between Black history and African history. We study African history, it gives us a picture of who we were before dealing with Europeans, because the culture of these people has become so second nature, we call it Black culture when we see it, if it's got the right color face on it. We accept it because it looks like us, because we don't understand that though it may look like us, it doesn't act like us. And so as Syke briefly mentioned the 9, well, Dr. Welsing added, I want to say health. Years ago, before she passed, she added health. So her list has 10, but 9, 10, either one. So extending ourselves beyond that and understand that everything you do, whether it's buying groceries, having sex, watching a movie, everything is subject of racism, white supremacy. Everything. One of the things that they like to do right about now, what I've seen them doing a lot of, is, I'm gonna use their words, shaming people, talking about, oh, he's a race baiter. Or that type of attitude when they say climate crisis is racist, or having EVs, electric vehicles, that's racist. They're belittling the idea, when in reality, yes, all of it, because racism, white supremacy is the culture of the world. When you have Africans who, dig it. So let's talk about gender, shall we? Gender role is an artificial construct, much like race. Understand, role simply means a part that you're supposed to play. That's what a role is. An actor has a role in a movie. That's the part they're supposed to play. So yes, it's a construct. Your role is a construct, but it's a construct that's was based on your gender, which is related to the word genes. which is where, sex used to mean what gender means now, until sex became more about the act of sex and being sexual and all of those things. Now gender is kind of taking over that, but the reality, the connection is still there. Your role based on your gender. In this country, in this culture, you have two qualifications to be a man. You have to be a male, and you have to hit 18. So you have a biological or a science-related aspect, and you've got a legal aspect. You've defined by saying, okay, number one, you're defined as a male. And you've developed that through the legal system by saying, okay, you have to hit 18. That's a development of your maleness. You hit 18, you have a penis, you're a man. This is manhood. But there's a key component that's missing from the science, from the law, and that component is the culture. In almost every non-European, and even in most European cultures around the world, there was a process in which, you've heard of it, rites of passage, where boys were taken from boyhood to manhood. They were trained, they were taught what it is to be a man. This is how a man acts. This is how he treats his woman. This is how he treats his kids. This is how he treats other men. They were taught that as a part of their development so that they could defend that idea, that concept to other cultures, to the next generation coming up. They had a cultural defense for the definition male and the development turning a particular age, the legality. But in this culture, there is no cultural part of that. Anybody that's 13 years old with a penis can call himself a man. Female, they're calling them, was it birth givers or whatever. This is really skewed for them. Because really you only have to hit 18. No, you really only have to be female. Because you can be 12 and have a child. It doesn't make you a woman. Just like being 12 and impregnating a woman. There was a teacher here recently, I think it was recently, a teacher got pregnant by a 12-year-old student again. The nonsense of this world. But all of this shit is racism, white supremacy. Why? Because it's the European culture that has left out that cultural aspect, that has left out that teaching and that training of what manhood is, what womanhood is, and has just left it to the wolves. You've left it to entire generations to figure it out on their own. And that's the way this culture works. There is no definition culturally of what a man or woman is. So culturally, socially, there's all types of confusion. And this pulls directly from their culture. This is the way that they do. That's why it's white supremacy, because they're forcing you, whether you want to or not, to accept cultural norms that are not your own. But you don't know that because we have no concept of who it is we are beyond being slaves, beyond being black, beyond being niggas. All we know is we woke up one day in America and it was hell. It was some bad shit going on. And some individuals got some pay. And so now the family is fine because a few have made it. So yes, that's racism, white supremacy, because it is the imposition of their culture, no definition of manhood, that's their culture, forcing it on you and on me. That's racism, white supremacy. But again, going back to my favorite, because they're individuals, they bear no cultural responsibility and sit around scratching their heads like dumbasses trying to figure out why this shit is happening like it's happening. We existed for thousands of years. We didn't have a problem understanding what a man is and what a woman is and what a man's supposed to do and what a woman's supposed to do. These folks have only been around for a couple of thousand years, and they messed up the entire paradigm. They have made individuals so individualized that the individual is at war with the individual self, because the individual self can't choose between the duality that is the reality in the back of their minds, but they're forced to express it as a singularity. It's just so fucked up. And it's because they're in charge. We ain't had this problem. And if you haven't studied the continent, you don't have an opinion in this conversation. You don't. You can't say it's not true. You can't deny it. But we can't argue the point, even for ourselves in our own minds, to convince ourselves or to investigate for ourselves, because we don't have the information, because we've accepted hook, line, and sinker their culture, put our faces on it, and called it our own. There is no black culture, only black culture, cultural blackface. It's us dressing up in our ways and acting like them. Your clothes, your hair, your music, none of those things is culture. That's not culture. That's what happens when a culture does. That's what happens from a culture. That's why if you are really into music, hearing the music, when you listen to black music, whatever the genre is, if it comes from this country, if it comes from people who were brought up in this country, there's always an undertone of sadness. There's always some hint of an oppressive state in that expression, because the culture simply tells you what's going on. It's not what's going on. It tells you what's going on. And so if we look at what we're doing in those cultural places we call culture, the music especially, and it's just so easy. I guess that's why I keep going back to it. If we just look at the musical expressions, if we look at hairstyles, we look at clothes, they're reflective of what's going on with us as a people, trying to do the mental gymnastics to excel in a system that tells you every day that you're a bitch and a nigga. And we think that by getting paid for that, that it's somehow okay. We are anesthetized to our own pain because we think we're individuals and we have no way to fight it. We've accepted their reality. We've accepted what they call death, and so we're scared to fight back. We've accepted the individualism, so we don't identify. We've got that Novocaine in our jaw, and so we see our brother go down or our sister go down, and we let them suffer peacefully. But we say peaceful while they suffer. We don't do anything to move. Sounds like a me problem. And that's racism, white supremacy. Apply it to everything you see. Ask yourself, anytime you come across any problem, wonder and figure out, too many baby daddies running around? That was back when they used to shop brothers around different plantations, having babies with different women. Sisters fucking around for money and flashing their bodies and shit. That's the shit they were forced to do back in slave days. P. Diddy being a sex trafficker and all of that. Yes, there were black folks that owned slaves back in so-called slave days. Yeah, there were. And now P. Diddy has joined that, possibly, allegedly, has joined that list of black folks that own slaves. But we can't connect the two because of the individuality. He's just P. Diddy. No, he's following the lines of a lot of black folks that exploited black folks and other folks. But we can't see it because of that. Those chickens, those going around look like they're walking. We're caught up in the illusion, not realizing that each individual one is making up that entire play.
Let me jump in on that part too, because I just kind of want to pick back up on that too when y'all talk about the aspect in terms of the environment that a thinking had to come out of for that. Before I even say that though, let me throw a term out there for y'all: suicide. And suicide basically is the death by the way of continuing the same traditions of enslavement that was passed on from our previous generation, which basically goes into the fact that we eat what our parents ate, whether that be our mental diet, physical diet, or spiritual diet. So that suicide is us continuing the same path of self-oppression because we don't know ourselves. But in going into one of the aspects that we got to look at in terms of the European background, in terms of just look at it from the standpoint of survival. This is how the concept of buy now, pay later dynamics work. Because in the natural world, that is called capacitance, which is basically the storing of a charge. When you live in an environment that is unforgiving, your survival depends on your capacitance to hoard. In order to hoard, that means you have to maximize the yield. So from that standpoint, through the evolution of slave-based economics, the slaveholder's best interest is to keep the slave in despair so that the masses can only focus on servitude and survival. Once you are beaten down emotionally and psychologically, nothing is left to inspire you to have creativity of your own production. And that's where we find ourselves, which goes into the aspect of one of the biggest hustles ever crafted in capitalism is when the corporation was created. Basically a legal system that created a process to protect the slaveholder from the effects of the slave commodity by making a straw man. This allowed the person to form a fictitious partnership. Fictitious meaning imaginary or not real. Keep in mind that the slave was never considered to be a real human being. So that same process of that commodity was carried on through the advent of the Industrial Revolution, which is when the corporation became a powerful thing. And this is why I refer back to people like John D. Rockefeller, because John D. Rockefeller was able to create through oil refinery, using that model to enrich and make himself a powerful person who owned over 90% of the wealth of the United States at one point in time as a result of that model. And this comes directly out of what y'all talked about earlier in regards to the Iceman inheritance. Because again, when you talk about buy now, pay later, this is where you push the dynamics of the average person and of the black person in particular, because of the fact that they had to hoard. So they created a system of hoarding that would allow them to thrive in the modern day environment. And that's all it is. It's a continuation. So that exploitation that we talk about is just a natural progressive process to make sure that a people are able to maximize themselves over a population, a world population where they are the minority. So I just wanted to shed a little light on that.
All right. Now I'm gonna read E said earlier, and I'm gonna kind of go into that a little bit. But E said earlier that you have to understand that white supremacy is their culture. That's what E said. I can't remember who you say you first heard it from, but you had to work through that idea, E. But E said this earlier. So I'm gonna give the definition of culture as it stated in the book "Who Are We" by Dr. Kirk Harrod. And y'all know I quote the book a lot. The reason why I quote this book a lot is because in this book, he deals with the development of humanity. He talks about humanity from the first single cell organism, a stratomalite, I think that's what it's called, all the way to the different aspects or versions, so to speak, of mankind that's on the planet. And he gives this anthropological definition of culture. And it fits in with everything that we're about to say. But he said that culture refers to the behaviors, the beliefs, and adaptive mechanisms that a group of people sharing a common experience have constructed to cope with their environment. Now let me read that again, because every word in this definition has some power to it, and it means something. He says that culture refers to the behaviors, beliefs, and adaptive mechanisms that a group of people sharing a common experience have constructed to cope with their environment. It is learned, taught, and unique to a group of people. A group of people's unique culture is crucial and irreplaceable for their prosperity. Now let's think about this, because I'm going to talk about culture from the European perspective, and why E is always talking about culture and talking about us living psychological blackface, us living out somebody else's culture, making it look like ours, but it's really somebody else's culture, and why that doesn't fit us. Because if you look at the definition, I'm gonna read it one more time. Listen at the definition. It says culture refers to the behaviors, the beliefs, and adaptive mechanisms. There are mechanisms in place that you have adapted. And for what purpose? The adaptive mechanism that a group of people sharing a common experience have constructed to cope with their environment. So these are things that the group of people, because of the common experience, have constructed in order that allows them to cope with their environment. Now imagine if you come from a sunny place and another group of people come from an extremely cold place. Now imagine you adapting the mechanisms that they adapted in that cold environment to survive in your environment. these two environments are contradictory of each other. It literally makes absolutely positively no sense whatsoever. But now I'm going to go into the thing that I like to kind of go into, because for me, it helps us make sense out of everything that Brother E has just explained. It helps it make sense out of it when you understand what caused it, what created it. And I'm gonna do a little reading, something that I really don't like to do, but I want y'all to understand that I'm not making this up and I'm not creating this. And I'm gonna give y'all a few books that y'all could go check out and do your own research, because it's very important to do your own research. And you're gonna see the books. I ain't gonna show them now because the stuff be blurry, so you'll just see the pictures of the books pop up on the screen. But some of the books that you can go to do this research is When the World Was Black by Supreme Understanding, Dr. Supreme Understanding. The dude has a doctorate. He goes by the Supreme word name Supreme Understanding because he's conscious enough to name himself. But the dude has did a deep dive into the development of humankind on this planet, and it's a very powerful book. When the World Was Black, Volume 1 and Volume 2 by Supreme Understanding. Who Are We? As I just quoted by Dr. Kirk Hammett. It's basically the same type of book, but it's written by a white man, and a Jew as well. He's a white Jew, and I give you that because he goes into this subject in deep detail. And a lot of people, unfortunately, because we are affected by white racism and white supremacy, don't believe knowledge unless it comes from a white man. So I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna put some white people on this list for you so that you don't think that we just making this stuff up. As I showed y'all earlier, Survival Strategy for Africans in America by Anthony Brada, which is a great book, especially if you're just beginning in these studies. The ISIS paper by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. The Iceman Inheritance by Michael Bradley, another white man, another book by a white person. And Civilization or Barbarism by Sheikh Anta Diop. All of these books goes into the subject matter that I'm supposed to break down so that you won't be sitting up saying, Brother Syke just got on the YouTube channel, just made up some stuff. All of those books that I just named, you can go research these books to find the information that's going to detail basically what I'm about to say in the next few minutes, hopefully 10 minutes or shorter. But I want to talk about what condition Europeans came out of, and I've talked about this before. Talked about it in length on our video. What is a revolutionary? I talked about it in the last video that we did on this subject, white supremacy, and I'm gonna talk about it again. And every time this subject come up, I'm probably gonna bring it up because I believe that in order to comprehend something, in order to understand something, you have to understand it. You have to gain an understanding of something in order to move to the level of understanding. And a lot of y'all that don't, a lot of the watching, the viewers that are watching who will hear E say the things that E is saying might not believe it or might not comprehend it, might not understand it. But first of all, and I'm gonna read this directly from, this is a note from Who Are We by Dr. Kirk Hammett, where he explains this. First of all, and I'm not going to go into the long, because we could, but that'll be a video on its own. But I'm just going to start with the development of humanity at the level of the Homo erectus. I'm gonna go into that. It says about 200 fossil evidence suggests, this is page 4 and Who Are We? Fossil evidence suggests that about 200,000 years ago, the African Homo erectus gave rise to Homo sapiens, truly modern man. So about 200 years ago, Homo erectus, which these are just anthropological terms that we're using, but this describes postmodern man before he fully developed the brain that we have today, before he fully developed the neocortex. Homo erectus would have looked just like us. He would have looked just like us. He just wouldn't have been as smart as us because he didn't have a fully developed neocortex yet. So he didn't have the dynamic skills that we have developed for language, for creating, for building, for even having these type of conversations, defining words, actually recording a history. He didn't have that ability. But in Africa, 200,000 years ago, according to the fossil record, Homo erectus evolved into Homo sapien, truly modern day man with a fully developed neocortex, who we are right now. The man that invented the internet, and I ain't talking about the individual, But the type of man that invented the internet, the type of man that invented the smartphone existed 200,000 years ago. He had the same mental capabilities, and he evolved in Africa. Now it says that that Homo erectus, I'm trying to get this Homo erectus also went into Europe. He traveled into Europe, and then he got caught in what was called an ice age, and it was extremely cold, and these ice glaciers completely covered Europe, and it didn't allow Homo erectus to walk back out or to travel back out of Europe. And being stuck in Europe, he then adapted to that environment. That adaptation came with the loss of melanin, longer and more hair, development of body hair, which is something that we didn't necessarily have in Africa because there was no need for it. The purpose of the hair was not only to give you more warmth, but to also give you a greater filter, bugs and things like that, to keep those things from getting in your nose, getting in your mouth and your ear, eyes, things of that nature. The nose, if you look at this wide African nose, that nose became more elongated in order not to take in as much air. Because if you're in a cold environment, the air is much thicker. It can cause freezing to the brain, things of this nature. So it needed more time to warm up as it went through the nose and then made it into the body. So the nose, if you notice, when you look at European, they have a more elongated nose, while people of African descent has this rounded nose. Just like I said, the loss of melanin. I just automatically assume that everybody know what melanin is, but it's the chemical that gives us dark skin color. Melanin is in all human beings on the planet, but it's in lesser degrees in Europeans for the very reason why it's in higher degrees in the original people on the planet Earth, because the original people on the planet Earth came from a place that was extremely sunny. Melanin blocks out the harmful UV rays of the sun and converts those UV rays into vitamin D inside the original man. Now, if you're trapped in an icy condition where it's cold 24 hours a day all the time, melanin becomes a liability because you don't need to block out any more sun than that's already been blocked out. So you lose melanin, you don't have as much sunlight, and you develop degenerative bone disease. When you understand this, and I said all this, and I'm trying to be fast with it because I know that this information can sometimes be kind of boring, but when you understand this and you understand that the genetic mutation that took place, what ended up happening is, matter of fact, according to Dr. Kirk Harrod, the Homo erectus, remember I told you Homo erectus became modern day man, Homo sapien in Africa. He evolved from Homo erectus to Homo sapien. But Homo erectus, who got trapped in the Ice Age in Europe, went from Homo erectus to Neanderthal. There is no Neanderthal in Africa. No anthropologist would tell you a Neanderthal ever walked Africa. Neanderthal is specific to Europe. So Homo erectus, because of this genetic mutation I just explained, the loss of melanin, the more hair, the elongated nose, the lighter eyes, and many other things that are characteristic of Europeans. That is the Neanderthal. And if you want to know what a Neanderthal is, just have your ideal of the caveman. Whenever you watch TV, cartoons, all that, the caveman, the hump in his back, that was the degenerative bone disease. There was not a lot of sun. Lack of vitamin D causes rickets, degenerative bone disease. That caused him to hunch over because he couldn't hold himself up. So it created a hump in his back. Also, Neanderthal was strong. You were talking about earlier, Ian, where they tried to say that black people was the missing link between gorillas and modern day human beings. But that was all propaganda. That was nonsense, because the Neanderthal would be closer to the quote unquote missing link. But there is no missing link in the fossil record. What scientists are saying, they are not saying that we came from monkeys. That's not what's saying. That's not what evolution is saying, for those who don't understand this. And again, a great book to read this information is When the World Was Black by Supreme Understanding. They're not saying that we came from monkeys. They're saying that the line that developed monkeys and human beings is the same line. Stratomalite looked like a tadpole, crawled out of the water. That broke into two lines. One line went this way and became our primates. One line went this way and became the human being. The monkey line, the primate line, does not have the gene to become a human being. That's why they never evolved into a human being. The line that went this way has the gene to form the human being. And you can see this, and if you look at modern day human beings, if you look at human beings around the planet, people that come from the same areas oftentimes look alike. They have the same type of features. They use the same patois, the same type of language, and they operate from the same culture. In anthropology, they call these haplogroups or blood groups. Because they are around each other, and that genetic pool mates with each other. So these people always end up looking alike. But anyway, let me get back to the point of the development and show you how we created Europeans. Let me get back to that point. So trapped in that ice age, the European Homo sapien, or the modern day white man, did not come into the fossil record, according to Dr. Kirk Harrod in the Who Are We, did not come into the fossil record until 40 to 50,000 years ago. Remember what I just said, the Homo sapien, the African Homo sapien, the original man became a Homo sapien 200,000 years ago, but the European didn't become a Homo sapien until 40 to 50,000 years ago. And that Homo sapien, and that Homo sapien migrated to Europe and overlapped the Neanderthal. They populated the same area for 15,000 years. By 30,000 years ago, Neanderthal was gone. So you got to ask yourself, what happened? What happened? What took place? The genetic code did not exist in the Neanderthal to evolve in the Homo sapien. It just wasn't there. After the Ice Age and the ice glaciers melted, then Africans made a second migration into Europe. And when they got there, they found this Neanderthal. In many schools of thought, like let's use the Nation of Islam school of thought for a minute. And I'm not promoting the Nation of Islam school of thought. I'm just going to show you how sometimes people can take a science and break it down into meta. It's something we've always did. Our people have always took what we knew to be reality and explained it and taught it to people in stories. Like you heard the story of the tortoise and the hare. You know they know tortoise and no hare had a race, but the truth of the story is still there for all people to see and learn from. But anyway, in the Nation of Islam story, it is said that somebody created the European. He was created, and then they tell you that once they found him, they say once Moses found the European, and I don't want to get into the religious stuff too much, but Moses found the European, he had to civilize this European. He had to civilize him because he was living in savagery, and it's really what happened. Once Africans took, according to the anthropologists, once Africans took this second migration into Europe, they found the Neanderthal with this hunchback. He was strong. He was knocking his women across the head with clubs and dragging her back to the cave. He was living bad. He wasn't bathed, and he was just living terrible. And the those Africans understood and knew. Well, I'm gonna say I believe that's what happened. The anthropologists don't actually say that. What they say is that they don't know what took place. They don't know if the African Neanderthal was at war. I mean, if the African Homo sapien was at war with the European Neanderthal. But one thing that we do know, that somehow, some way, the genetics to become Homo sapien had to be introduced to the Neanderthal. And the only way that can possibly happen is through sex. You would have to mate them out. You would actually have to have sex with the Neanderthal in order to introduce that Homo sapien gene into the child. So the Neanderthal itself would then be wiped out genetically. That's what would actually take place. And that's what helped him evolve into Homo sapien, or modern day man, the Cro-Magnon, or as the Nation of Islam like to say, bringing them out of darkness, or took them out of savagery into civilization. They had to actually breed out the Neanderthal, who just simply didn't have the ability. And I'm gonna say this, and then I'm gonna pass the mic, because my whole point I wanted to get at was the mind state, that culture that E keep talking about when E says that racism and white supremacy is their culture. See, when they were stuck in that ice age, think about it. The last time you was in the listening audience, last time you was in the snow. If you up east, you probably seen a lot of snow, a lot of cold. When we was going through Denver, Colorado, when we was on those mountains heading out to Utah, it was free. It was cold. It was freezing.
It went 90.
Yeah, I don't know what was wrong with E, but if you think about this, When you're in the cold, when you're in the cold environment like that, you don't see apples growing. Bananas are not growing there. Corn is not growing there. All these different foods that grow naturally from trees and that the earth gives you is not growing there. So the only thing that you would have to eat in that type of environment is basically other flesh. You have to eat other animals. That would be what you would eat. And the other animals are high in protein. They don't have the other minerals and vitamins that you necessarily need for survival. I mean, vitamin E is necessary for the growth of skin, nails, and hair. Vitamin D is necessary for the development of bone structure. Beta carotene is necessary for the development of the pupil of the eyes. And we can go on and on and on. And these things come from things that just simply was not in Europe because it was freezing cold. Matter of fact, if you think about it, the entire environment in that ice age was trying to eliminate the European. It was a dog-eat-dog world. You know, it was individualistic. It would have to be. You know what I'm saying? Because sometime when you couldn't find food, I might turn around and knock E upside his head and eat E. You know, it might have to come to that. No homo. It might have to come to that. But that was the environment that developed not only the psychology of the European, but his culture. That was the environment that developed it. The animals were trying to kill him and he was trying to kill them. The nature was trying to kill him and he was trying to kill it. That's why he didn't have a religion to come out of Europe with. He didn't develop religion until he came in contact with original people, and original people taught him the ideal of spirituality. And through that is where he developed his ideal of religion. And just like anything else, like any other people would do, his expression of religion would automatically be an expression of his culture, which is naturally oppressive. It would naturally be the exact thing that his culture or his environment developed his culture to be. You have to understand that. So when the ice glaciers melted and he finally came out of the caves and hills of Europe and came in contact with other people, his thought process would not change automatically because he came out of the cave. He would automatically think that his thought process was right. You know, an ice age can come and wipe everything out. I got to get as much as I can possibly get to ensure and make sure that I'm not murdered and killed. It's a dog-eat-dog world. You don't have what you need. That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. This is the thought process that would have came out of that. And just like I just read earlier from Dr. Kirk Harrod, page 10, when he explained what culture is, culture refers to the behaviors, beliefs, and adaptive mechanisms that a group of people sharing a common experience have constructed to cope with their environment. And that's why he said that racism is culture for Europeans, because they adapted and constructed these thoughts and these ideas in order to be able to cope with an oppressive and a violent environment. So when they came out of that and saw people that had land, now, and I'm going to shut up after I say this, y'all. I promise you. Now let's do the opposite. Let's flip this thing around. Let's do the mirror effect. Imagine how African people were living in Africa. It's extremely sunny. Matter of fact, it was so sunny that you almost didn't need any clothes, because the purpose of clothing is to block out you harmful sun rays and to keep you warm. It's already warm, so you didn't need it. Food was growing naturally on trees. I don't know if y'all know this. I don't know if anybody know this, but our first food sprung forth from the planet. I know that's a wild idea. It didn't come from Walmart. It sprung forth from the planet, and it grew naturally from the ground and from the trees. So the first things that we ate, grapes and apples and oranges and bananas and things of this nature. And like I just described earlier, all the essential vitamins and minerals for fully developing the human being will come from these things. It's only two major things that we get from meat. It's only two major things that we get from meat. That's protein and that's iron. That's what we get from meat. And if you ever look at bodybuilders take protein supplements in order for their muscles to get bigger. Incidentally, the Neanderthal was extremely strong. He was stronger than the Homo sapien. The Neanderthal, according to the anthropologists, was stronger than Homo sapien. Maybe that's because his diet was primarily meat. That's all he ate was meat. So he would become bigger and stronger than the Homo sapien who was in Africa eating vegetables and fruit and things of this nature. So you have to understand this. The mind state of the African would look at his nature, would look at everything around him as a part of him. Nature blesses me. As I just said, it's sprung forth from the earth. We learned to cultivate it and control it, but it came from the earth naturally, the food that we ate. We followed the food, we followed the rivers, we followed these things. And so when you got a people that have that mind state, their thinking is that everything is in harmony, everything is in balance, everything is exactly the way that things should be. And then they would develop a belief system that believed in giving praise to the earth for blessing me the way it has, giving praise to the sun for blessing me the way it has, understanding that what my ancestors taught and left behind is what helps me to keep growing and building. So I give praise to my ancestors for blessing me for the way they have. So you have these two competing ideologies, these ways of beliefs that came from the environment that us as a people developed from. And I'm gonna read one more thing and then I'm done, y'all. This is from Dr. Kirk Harris too, and his breakdown of our culture. Now he said, a group of people's unique culture, because all groups of people have a unique culture that's unique to their personal experience. Y'all got to keep that in mind. A group of people's unique culture is crucial and irreplaceable for their prosperity. The disruption of a group's culture impedes the collective accomplishments, not the individual, as he was breaking down earlier. The disruption of a group's culture impedes the collective accomplishments of the group and prevents the individuals in that group from achieving their potential. It is no coincidence that very high rates of alcoholism, unemployment, and failure to find a place in society are found in two groups whose cultures was nearly destroyed by Europeans: African Americans and Native Americans. Those are the two groups he was talking about. But that when you understand that makes this whole conversation makes a whole lot more sense. That makes it make sense when you understand what, and like I say, I didn't give that a lot of justice because it probably would take a whole 2-hour show to really just break down how we created the European. And I say we created them for a reason, but it would break down, it takes that to break down. But when you understand that this is where his mind state came from, this is not racism. We're not ranting anti-white or anti-white concepts and ideas. We don't even believe in those ideas. Well, I don't know about E, but we don't really believe in those ideas.
Hi, Mama. Hi. Hey, Ma.
But we're just talking about this mind state. And this mind state, and another thing that we have to understand is that why you must understand that all white people are affected by white supremacy and racism. And that might sound weird for Brother Syke to say, guess what? If you was born in America, all black people are affected by it too. I go further to say all black people are racist. And I ain't talking about reverse racism. I'm talking about against black people. I'm talking about all black people are racist, just like all white people in this system are racist, because this system was birthed on white racism and white supremacy, and it teaches it. It teaches it. If you've ever looked at a white picture of Jesus and gave praise to Jesus, and you can't get the ideal of a white Jesus out of your head, then you're probably racist. You know, if you've ever put up a tree and put some ornaments on top of it and put all your presents around it, you're probably a racist. But like we said at the beginning of the show, and like Dr. Francis Cress Wilson said, when you don't understand what racism and white supremacy is, everything else that you think you know will only confuse you. And I'm gonna leave with that, y'all.
Well, I think that just speaks right on what I was saying about the suicide. You know, we eat what our parents eat, and we don't realize that we've been force-fed this self-destructive diet. And I like to take that back to what he brought up earlier too, in regards to the mercenary. So let's see this now in terms of his current state, because I think part of the problem is that some folks gonna throw up their guard because what they feel like we're doing is attacking, because they're not able to resonate with the actual truth and the facts of what they are. So when we look at this in the modern day terms, we have to see it through the eyes of the mercenary. So the mercenary warrior's primary concern through war is making money at the expense of ethics, nature, or life itself. And they go on to say that my enemy is my enemy. And the regulation of their death is the cost of doing business. And that is the mindset that it takes for somebody to go into the continent of Africa with the whole intent of just exploiting the people, just toppling and destroying the governments, and taking the natural resources and doing it in such a way to where basically they're putting up this illusion that these people don't know how to take care of themselves. They're savages. So it is in the world's best interest that I take control of their nation, take control of their country, take control of their lives, and take what natural resources are of this land and let the people continue to self-destruct. Not realizing, most of us not realizing that pattern of self-destruction was interjected and introduced into that life system. And that goes into what Psych is saying about how abundant life was and is in Africa. But what you do is you reverse teach the people to hate themselves. You teach the people to not be dependent upon their own way of life, but to create what we call a codependence. By creating that codependency, that goes into the coping lifestyle that was referenced earlier. When people are in the mode of coping, they're in a mode of survival. When you're in a mode of survival, you're not going to be in a creative state of mind anymore. You're now all about survival. And that survival, again, is interjected and introduced into that population simply because you have the natural resources being turned against itself. You have the people being turned against itself. You have a culture of debt that has been introduced into that society to replace the culture of life. That is the only way that you can come in and you can take from a powerful people is by creating these subcultures and these systems of destruction and getting the people to buy into that. And that's kind of where we are. So when we talk about why this discussion upon white supremacy is what it is, in order for us to see our current condition as what it is, you have to take it back to the origin of why certain things were introduced. And when you talk about the way these systems were introduced, now you can see how that being built upon itself generationally and through centuries, how basically just been a perfected system of self-destruction and imperialism from that standpoint, and capitalism as it's applied here is just a modern day version of everything that it takes in order to keep that system alive in an operation. So that's just where we are with that. Go ahead, E, you got something?
No. I mean, it's difficult. You know, again, the cure for all of this is figuring out who the hell it is we are, what it is we're supposed to be, and having the willingness to confront that within ourselves, which is something that we are losing generationally. You know, there's a lot of frustration now, a lot of people looking for answers and trying to figure things out, which is great. But there's still that element of arrogance that the individual mindset has bestowed upon us. You know, we can't, the repression of the feminine and not looking within our own selves and critically analyzing what it is we do. We constantly want to guard and keep ourselves from looking bad, looking stupid, looking whatever, as opposed to really doing the work of digging within oneself. You know, the lack of a definition of manhood and womanhood is probably the most critical issue, you know, specifically, you know, under the broader umbrella of racism, white supremacy. White folk, we never had a women's rights movement in Africa. And I'm talking in ancient time. That's some white shit, because we had our roles, we had our purpose, and we stayed in our lane and we did what it is we were supposed to do. Yes, we had issues. Every country, every nation has issues, but we didn't build an empire on those issues to exacerbate those issues. Matter of fact, in that last video, someone was said that I need to correct. Europeans did not introduce tribalism to Africans. Africans have always had an issue with fighting each other, infighting. In fact, it was the Hyksos, before they invaded Kemet and essentially, overthrew things we had done. Kemet was invaded from the south by some Kushites. I forget was it Taharka, and I forget the other two cats. But that tendency has always been there. All the white folks did was come in and exacerbate it, took advantage of it. They're very good at that. Remember, these are warlike people. So everything they do is predicated on the idea that they're at war with you. As soon as they get up in the morning, dog eat dog. I'm getting in a rat race. I got to get mine. You got to get yours. That's their attitude. That's their approach to life. Like Syke was talking about, if you got to fight the other animals just to eat, you're going to pass that down to your children. And they're going to pass it down and pass it down. They're going to develop it. They're going to grow it. And eventually, they've made an empire out of it. They've made an entire system of oppression out of it. And it's something that they still express. If you took some characteristics of capitalism, and I like using capitalism because it's codified, it's easy to look at. But if you take some of the characteristics of the economic expression of individuality, aka racism, white supremacy, and you compared it to the way that they came up, you will see some glaring similarities. They run hand in hand. They're doing exactly what it is they were doing when they crawled out of the caves of Europe. They're acting the exact same way. It's refined. The chains that shackle you are now gold plated. They're shining. And instead of slave ship, it's a record deal. It's the same shit. But we don't know that because we haven't looked at any of the history per the way that they operate. It's just a tactic. You keep the oppressed people stupid, because the people that know themselves, know their history, understand what freedom is, won't be oppressed. So you have to keep them dumb, which is, and separated and detached, especially when that's an intricate part of their nature and their culture. So again, we've bought into these ideas that Europeans have raised us on, and we are literally going batshit crazy trying to figure out what's going on. This is what's going on. We're trying to operate like them, and it does not work for us because we are not them. We don't see the world as something to be conquered. Historically, we see the world as something to be cooperated with. We see the world through a balanced approach, masculine and feminine. They see the world through a masculine approach, always projecting, always going out to get, always putting themselves onto somebody else. That's not our way. And all you have to do is hang out in the hood. I don't care how bad it is. You're still going to get some African vibes based on what's going on. Not just the music, not just, no, but the way we treat each other, the way we interact, the things we call each other, all of those things. When we say brother, it means something different when somebody white says brother. It's different. It doesn't just sound different. It's different. What would Jesus do? We take, that's one of the reasons religion works so well on us, because we take it to the fullest. We take it to the most extreme. We go in depth and detail with it. European rolls over the top of it, takes what they want, applies it in lip service, and then does what I guarantee you, Eric Prince, who is advocating for the outright, not that it has ever stopped, but the outright full-faced colonial return to Africa. I guarantee you he's a Christian. And there's no Christian watching this right now that can say that he's not a Christian, because for you to sit up and say he's not a Christian is very white of you. So, so their approach to life makes all the things that they do possible without a conscience. It makes all the things possible that they do in line with their culture, because it is their culture. It's what they grew out of, and it's not our culture. And we so desperately have to learn who it is we are. So we have to grab some book, Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams, Sex and Race, three volumes by J.A. Rogers. Sheikh Anta Diop. The list goes on and on. John Henrik Clarke, love that dude. He's got some dope video. He got some really nice videos of him speaking. But grabbing information from beyond what it is you were told when you got here. All that you know, you've been told by them. It's time for us at some point to take control of that and begin to fill our minds, even if it's little by little, with something more substantial, with something that builds us up, something that gives us some type of internal strength, because we've lost all of that. We've lost all of that. Gen Z, we're fucked. I'm sorry, but we're fucked. Everything about it is wrong.
And let me say this, because it's almost time. Well, it actually is time for us to close out. And so, y'all, we had our last statements. I'm gonna say this, and this might make some sense to people. Brother E talked about the guy Eric. What's his name? The dude that created Blackwater. Eric.
Eric Prince.
Prince. And one of the things he said in that clip that you showed us a few minutes ago is that basically he said the reason why Africa need to be colonized and completely taken over is because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to run. They don't know how to run the country. Everywhere you go in Africa, according to him, that you'll find a whole bunch of tyrants raping, pillaging, and murdering, taking. You'll find this. You'll find this, and you probably will find it in most of the places. And this is something we have to understand. Imagine, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the listening audience have probably seen the movie Avatar before. Imagine, you remember the Europeans are basically the people. They came in to take the blue peoples, it's always people of color, to take those people's land. And they wanted it for profit reasons, as E keep talking about capitalism. That was the whole thing it was about. Even when the chick Sigourney Weaver, I can't remember what her character's name was, but Sigourney Weaver, when she started to understand what that sacred tree meant to the people, what it meant to those people, and she tried to explain it to the head businessman who was in charge of the operation. And if you notice, they even had their mercenary soldiers with them. They're doing the fighting to run the people out, to run I can't remember the name of the race of people in the movie, but to run the blue people out. And she tried to explain it, and he looked and he listened, and he just laughed. He said, "Man, they're trees, man. This is in the way of development. We're gonna knock this stuff out, man. Bulldoze that stuff. I don't care about that, because now understand this. Understand that these movies, that this is art imitating reality. That's why it was such a mass seller. That's why the movie The Matrix was such a mass seller. That's why these movies. That's why the Empire Strikes Back was such a mass seller. It has such mass appeal because deep down we know that this is historically what took place. Now imagine this for a minute. Imagine in the movie Avatar, the white people taking over these people's planet, bulldozing the trees, and then teaching these blue people to act and think like them. Imagine that. Imagine these blue people walking around in suits like them, talking like them, and going other places trying to bulldoze other groups of people's trees. Imagine that. And now you don't even have to imagine it anymore because it's real life. It actually didn't happen. It actually took place. It actually took place. It actually, the P. Diddy's of the world in their suits, it actually has taken place. It's real. We're walking around trying to act out a culture that's not ours. And according to the definition that I gave y'all earlier from Dr. Kirk Harrod, a group of people's unique culture was something that they adapted and created so that they could survive their particular environment. We're living out another people's culture that was adapted for them, but doesn't fit who we are and where we're coming from. Just imagine how lost those blue people in Avatar would be if they were walking around trying to operate and act like the European. Because that's what's happening right now, and that's what has taken place in our society. We have become that, and that's what Brother E meant by the minstrel show. That's what he meant by that. Go ahead, Brother E. Matter of fact, you can bring us to a close if Brother War don't have anything to bring.
I got one quick thing, and he can end it. I just wanted to talk on the whole thing of us talking about finding ourselves and being who we are. We have to realize that what we're dealing with now is what is called a saturation being used as a weapon, which when we say saturation, you basically being over inundated. The whole point of that is it creates this cloud, a universal cloud of data that's piled on top of our addiction for content. Mind you, people are now addicted to content instead of deep focus. And so because of our addiction to content and our oversaturation of data, when people think that when they think they want to search for something and they're just trying to find out what's missing in life, they end up basically occupying their time. By occupying my time, I tend to think that that's what's missing in my life. That's what's missing to keep me from being fulfilled, which is why the whole weapon that he talks about in terms of identity politics is able to creep in there and take the place of our cultural identity and the power of people recognizing people power, because this fills that void per se, fills that void of me not realizing who I am. So instead of really getting down to the source of what I am, I end up basically getting inundated in this weapon saturation of content, which causes me to want to now create my own identity, now create my own lane, and think that I can overpower the natural law and the natural process and the natural way of what actually humanity is. And so this causes us to accept answers as opposed to real solutions. We're not seeking solutions anymore as a people. We just want to get an answer. And an answer is oftentimes going to simply point you to a problem, but it's not going to put you in a direction of resolving that problem. It's going to point you to a problem, and for the sake of getting you to cope with that problem. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a lifestyle of coping. And when people are dealing with a lifestyle of coping, at that point, they're just basically finding addictions and finding ways to cope with the fact that they are enslaved, they are suffering, they are subjugated, they are being victimized. And so they sit with that victimization, they sit in that coping lifestyle, and they allow that to be their answer to being able to go day in and day out and just survive and stay in that mode of survival. Because a person's reality is only a reflection of their perception. So if my perception is flawed and my perception is based upon that suicide that we talked about earlier, then that is going to be a perpetual cycle of a self-destructive life that they find themselves stuck in. So that's all I had to end with.
Well, Malcolm said, of all our studies, history is best suited to reward our efforts. Something like that. But it is absolutely true. It is imperative that we as a people begin to dig into our background and realize that we're not moving forward. Just like that chicken on that little carousel. We think we're moving forward, when in reality, we're just a bunch of individuals in different positions standing still. So until we get an idea of what it is, where it is we came from, and then dig into how the hell we got to where we are, the painful discussions that have to be had, until we get those things under control and start addressing them, things are only going to get worse and worse. The thread is being pulled. We're going in all different directions, and that's never in the history of history has never worked for African people, because it's just not who we are. That's racism, white supremacy.